Well, as of Tuesday morning, nearly 250,000 acres of California land have been burned by the Camp and Woolsey fires. Those two fires have destroyed an estimated 18,000 structures, forcing people out of their homes in search of safety. And that has turned residents into refugees in some of the richest areas in one of the richest countries in the world. The California fire is just one example of how extreme weather is making parts of the planet uninhabitable, forecasting a grim future for those who can't afford to move. Joining me now, author, educator, and co-founder of grassroots climate movement 350.org, Bill McKibben. Bill wrote the New Yorker article you just saw, how extreme weather is shrinking the planet. So, Bill, nearly 30 years ago, you actually wrote a piece in the New Yorker titled "The End of Nature." It's about the impact of greenhouse effect on the Earth. Since then, what's changed in your outlook of the planet?
Well, what's changed, Rena, is that 30 years have gone by. 30 years ago, that was the first book for a general audience about climate change. At the time, we knew that we were in serious trouble, but we also assumed that our governments and leaders would do something about that trouble. And basically, for 30 years, the fossil fuel industry has been strong enough to prevent that from happening. As a result, what was theoretical 30 years ago is now people's excruciating daily lives. Think about the fact that we're in this country, this rich and amazing country, and we have hundreds of people now missing from a holocaust, a firestorm, an inferno that swept through the Sierra Nevada foothills. Something like that's happening almost every day now, someplace on planet Earth.
Bill, as we see these extreme weather sort of shrinking the planet, do you get the sense we're going to see more mass migration to new areas?
Yeah, the UN estimates that we can expect something like 140 million people migrating by the middle of the century. Think about what about 1 million people migrating out of Syria did to upset the political balance of Europe and in some ways of the United States. Think about how absurdly terrified we are at the moment that there's a couple of thousand migrants in a caravan coming from the drought-stricken parts of Central America. Now multiply that by hundreds and thousands of times, and you get some sense of what this century is going to be like unless we get our act together very, very quickly. Remember, the people who have done the least to cause climate change are the people who suffer from it first and worst. And it's only natural that they're going to be on the move. What else can they do?
Do you have a sense of what areas these people would move to?
Oh, I think that the biggest movements around the Earth are going to be first away from the coastlines. As sea level rises and storms become more severe, we're seeing that already. There's stories in today's papers about people abandoning their apartments and leases along the coasts of Florida and North Carolina. But as people move inward toward the continental interiors, the problem is that we're seeing completely unprecedented heat waves. There's an arc kind of through the India, Pakistan, into the Middle East with 1.5 billion people on it, where scientists say on current trajectories, it's simply going to be too hot for people to live by the latter part of this century. So job number one is to slow down the rate at which we're heating the planet, to stop burning fossil fuel as fast as we can, because that'll give us some more margin anyway to operate with. And at this point, margin is what we desperately need.
I want to turn back and ask you about California, those wildfires. You saw those residents. Some of them were able to leave immediately because they had cars. They were able to escape. The poorer people were effectively trapped in this evacuation zone. How does this pattern of climate inequality play out over time?
Well, this is the new reality. I mean, think back a decade to Katrina, when we were all shocked by the fact that there were tens of thousands of people who it turned out had no way to leave New Orleans as it drowned. That's true around the world. It's certainly true around the country. If you're poor and vulnerable, and in the case of these communities in California, especially if you're elderly, this becomes even more of a terror than it already is. It's why we need this big, rapid, intergenerational effort to make change happen fast. It's why it's so good that there are people in Congress all of a sudden talking about a Green New Deal or things like that, because that's exactly the scale of change that we need if we're ever going to catch up with the physics of climate change.
Will it ever be too late for humans to turn this around, Bill?
Well, it's already too late to stop global warming. Uh, the temperature has gone up a good deal already, and it's going to go up some more. The question now is whether we can stop it short of the point at which it absolutely makes it impossible to have civilizations like the ones we're used to. I mean, it's a long escalator down into hell, Rena, and we're going to fight every step of the way. But man, it's time to start turning things around.
When you talk about turning things around, you mentioned fossil fuel burning. What else can be done before it's too late, Bill?
Well, that's probably the key. We need to stop burning coal, oil, and gas and replace it with sun and wind. One of the great ironies of the fire in California is that California has done a great deal to start moving in the right direction. They're doing more renewable energy than most places on the planet. But they've also refused to stop drilling for oil, even in the places that are getting hit by wildfires. They put, Governor Brown continues to permit oil wells every week, new ones going in. That's what we've got to get away from. And so that's the essential task. It's incredibly difficult. Fossil fuel is what runs the world's economy, and we've got to switch it out while we're in motion. But what choice do we have? I mean, when you look at those pictures, you understand what the alternative is.
You certainly do. Those pictures say so much. Bill McKibben, grateful you could join us for this conversation.
A real pleasure, Rena. Thank you very much.